Hello, I have so many fun things to share with you today, and so we're just gonna dive right in. We have new $5 pattern of the month. I've got new scrappy block. I've got a brand new quilt pattern. It is just a little bit of everything today, and I think it's going to be a fun one. Let's start with the $5 pattern of the month. So this is the $5 pattern of the month for February. It is called Scrap Basket Stars. This quilt is made using my Peachy Keen line of fabric, and it is a scrappy, happy quilt. The fun thing about this pattern, I know a lot of you have been in a scrap busting frame of mind lately, as have I. And the fun thing about this quilt is all of these prints are either 2.5 or 3-inch squares. So if you wanted to forego this fat eighth bundle that the pattern requires, that is what you would need if you wanted to purchase for the quilt. But if you wanted to forego that bundle and just use 2.5 and 3-inch squares, you could really put a dent in your scrap basket. It would be a really fun quilt made totally scrappy with all of those good little squares that settle down to the bottoms of our scrap bins. This quilt is 60 by 72. In addition to the prints, you will also need your background fabric, which I used the white on white from Peachy Keen for the background in my quilt. You need 1 3/4 yard, a yard of border fabric. This cute little print here from Peachy Keen is what I used here. But again, if you were making this totally scrappy and it was full of all kinds of colors, you would just choose a beautiful print to go with. One fun way to approach scrap quilt making, if you don't want to go too scrappy and you kind of want to have more of a controlled scrappy quilt, would be to choose this fabric first, to choose your border fabric first, and then pull scraps from your scrap bin that coordinate with that border fabric. That is an easy way to still go scrappy, but to kind of have some control over the colors and fabrics that you are picking out. Your binding fabric, of course I have a stripe, and then backing fabric. Everything in this quilt is Peachy Keen, but like I said, it would be a fun scrap quilt. So when I have the pattern of the month, it's $5 over in my Etsy shop, and I will have that linked down below. I have it available in paper or PDF, so you can purchase whichever you would prefer. And hopefully you will have fun making up a scrappy Scrap Basket Stars quilt of your own. I'm gonna hold this one up one last time for you guys to see a little bit better. Now, I am also going to link to the Peachy Keen trunk show video that I shared, so that if you wanted to see this quilt or some of the other Peachy Keen quilts, this guy here to my right, or this quilt here, these are both in that trunk show along with some other Peachy Keen quilts. So if you wanted to see those in a little bit more detail, you could. I will also tell you that if you're ever wondering about any of the quilts that are back in my backdrop, I always have those linked in the description box below each video. So I know I often will get asked, especially about this one. This is Beholden 2. So if you have been wondering but haven't asked, that's the name of this quilt pattern, and it's linked to the pattern in that description box. Okay, so we were talking scrappy. Let's just dive into my next scrappy block pattern. This has been a fun series that I have been hosting here on the YouTube channel, where I have been sharing various scrappy blocks. I've got to hide that guy. I'm not showing him just yet. Okay, so I have been showing various scrappy blocks, and this is the new one for today. It's a scrappy snowflake block, and it's beautiful in these blues. I've been using a lot of these blue shades for my Moda Blockheads blocks, and so I had a little stack of them ready. I oftentimes will just have that stack just sitting on my cutting table, and then when I get a minute, I'll cut out the next week's block and get it sewn together. Otherwise, Wednesdays sneak up on me and I don't have my block done. So I had my little pile sitting there, and for the Blockheads blocks, I've been adding in some of that coral, some of these coral shades here, in with all of these blues. These blues are from Peachy Keen, which is this, but then also Blueberry Delight, which is from Ann Sutton, which is designed by her. And so my Mona Blockheads blocks, I've been mixing in the peaches, but I wanted to try just the blues, and I think that turned out so pretty. Love the way that looks. And then I'm going to go through those other blocks to show some of you who might be new to these scrappy blocks that information. But this is what the block looks like if you just run it 4 across by 4 down. It makes this really pretty, I don't know, snowflakey, starry sky kind of look. I think that's really neat. So that is the block. Now, again, if you're new, the way these patterns work, they're free over on my blog. You can just print out the pattern. They look like this. And actually, I'm going to go through this in just a little bit to give you an idea of what the piecing looks like. But so you just go over to my blog. It's linked down below. Print out your pattern, and then you can make a fun block of your own. These are the blocks that we have done so far. Scrappy Tree. These are all 12-inch finished blocks. The Clover block. Scrappy Heart block. This one was the first one that I did. Scrappy Tulip, Scrappy Flag, and now, of course, we have Scrappy Snowflake. And they all make really neat patterns when you put them together on their own within a quilt, which has been really neat. Okay, so let's take a look at this pattern. I like to go over this just a little bit so that you have an idea of what you're looking at with the piecing. So as I said, it's a 12-inch finished block. These are the fabrics you're going to need to complete one block. So you've got a variety of shapes in this block, sizes and different shapes. Oftentimes they are squares. Well, sometimes they're squares. Sometimes I add in other shapes. This one I think has more variety of shapes than some of these previous blocks have. And I guess by variety of shapes, I'm just talking about squares and rectangles. So, but different sizes of them. You can see what you need here. I'm going to pull this over here. So for mine, I stuck with mostly medium blues and dark blues. And then you do want to make sure that you have plenty of contrast for the white parts. I had considered using some of the prints. Let me see if I can show you one like this guy right here for some of these parts, but I don't think that would have given me enough contrast. You can see that you do need the most contrast that you can get to show off the pattern. If it gets a little bit too busy in these sections here, you're going to lose your design. So keep that in mind when you're choosing your fabrics. So I just used white on whites. These are all, I think it looks like all from Coriander Seeds. Yes, all from Coriander Seeds, which is my white on white line of basics fabrics. You can get all of those in quilt shops all the time. Okay, so you're going to start by making half square triangles, and then you are making this little bit right here, which is this section here at the top of the block right here. So you're making this first, and then when you come to the second page, you're going to be making this center portion right here, which you can see right here. It's the center portion. So it's this chunk right here. And then you're going to make this bottom piece, which is pretty much the same as the top, just oriented a little bit differently. And then you put everything together. So it's the squares, rectangles, and then half square triangles. As with all of my previous patterns, you will find pressing instructions denoted by the arrows throughout the pattern. This one comes together nicely. If you wanted to put multiple blocks together and make something like this quilt here, you might consider pressing these outer half square triangles open just so that you don't run into bulk where the blocks come together. But it sewed up very nicely, and again, that's what that looks like when you put a whole bunch of blocks together. This would be a 48 by 60 inch quilt if you did 4 blocks by 5 blocks. Okay, so as I said, this pattern is available over on my blog. It's linked in the description box below, so if you want to grab that pattern. And I will make sure and link down below for the videos and blog posts for these previous blocks as well, so that if you missed any of those or forgot to print out a pattern, you can go and grab the previous blocks as well. Okay, now you might have been thinking, Corey, why didn't you design a snowman block instead of a snowflake block? And that had been a thought of mine, but what I knew that you guys didn't know was that I had a new snowman pattern coming out featuring Peachy Keen. So this is my brand new warm-hearted quilt pattern. It is just releasing today. It is a pattern I had in my sketchbook ever since I knew Peachy Keen was coming out, because all of these blues that I've just been talking about in Peachy Keen, all of the blues, of course some of these are Blueberry Delight, but a lot of Peachy Keen in there, work beautifully for a winter themed snowman quilt, as you can see here. So I've got it right here. This was also one of the quilts, if you watched my 6 quilt unboxing video I shared, was that just last week? When I got my quilts back from David, this was one of the ones that I had to pull out that I couldn't show you just yet, but we're gonna take a look at this. It's so pretty in Peachy Keen. I'm gonna hold it up here, but I'm gonna hang it up behind me so that you can see it better. It's such a fun wintry quilt. And there she is. Doesn't that look spiffy? I think it's just the cutest little quilt. And I just love the way Peachy Keen works here. I oftentimes like fabrics that you don't expect in a quilt. I think Peachy Keen can read kind of spring or summer, but I knew as soon as I was designing these prints that it was going to work beautifully for winter also. The blues are perfect, and then those little pops of the peachy coral in there are just great for the nose and cheeks. And the grays, I think it's just so pretty. So this is a yardage based quilt, so you would be buying yardage for what you need. It is 56 by 72, so a nice lap sized quilt. But of course, if you wanted to make this quilt bigger, you could pretty easily do so by widening your border, adding extra borders, or adding additional blocks. I'm gonna take this down because this quilting is so perfect for this quilt too. So I do want to show you that up close. And here is the quilting up close. This is that circles nested design by Julie Hurt that we've been using so frequently. This is the 3rd quilt I think I had David use this on last year, and I love the way it looks. I pulled this quilt, which I shared in my Coriander Colors trunk show. I'll link to that trunk show in case you missed that. This is the same quilting design, but the scale is a lot smaller. So here the circles are just a little bit bigger than a dime, maybe a nickel sized. And here they are, oh, I don't know. That's pretty big, more than an inch. I don't know if it's quite 2 inches. You get the idea with my hand beside it, but it just works so pretty. I told David I wanted it bigger on this quilt because I thought that was going to be perfect here, almost like snowballs across the whole quilt. And sometimes I want it smaller. And I think no matter the scale, this quilting design is a really neat one. So might be one that you'd be interested in looking at for one of your quilts. And I will have that quilting design linked in the description box down below as well. Now we can take a look at these fabrics a little bit better. So Peachy Keen, I'm gonna slide this up here just a little bit. Mostly Peachy Keen. Now for the whites, I used the medallion print from Coriander Seeds, which is one of my favorite white on white prints just across the board. I think it's so pretty. It just reminds me of little lacy doilies spread throughout, and I love the detail that it gives. So this white on white is from Coriander Seeds. Of course, you could use the Peachy Keen white on white if you wanted to. That is the same print as what his eyes and mouth are. And any of the white on whites in my Coriander Seeds line of fabric match any of my fabric lines, and it's the same shade as Motabella Solid in the color 9900-200, which is off-white. And then we have the snowmen framed out with that pretty blueprint. The sashing is the same print in white. For the binding, I used the gray stripe from Peachy Keen. Now my backing is a 108-inch wide that I had on hand from the Basic Gray Compositions line. I don't know if you can still get this in quilt shops right now or not, but that's the name of it if you were to want to Google and see if you could find that available. So that's what that looks like. And that is warm-hearted, and I think it's adorable. So that is my all kinds of things to share in one video. So we started with that $5 pattern. We swung over to the scrappy block, and we're finishing things off with a brand new quilt pattern and all things peachy keen, it seems like, in this video. It's a fun fabric line. It is in quilt shops right now, so if any of the projects that I shared with you today struck your fancy, peachy keen might be the way to go. If you have any questions about anything, be sure to leave me a comment so I can answer that for you. And of course, look in the description box below the video because there is going to be a lot of information down there. Links to my blog, links to my Etsy shop, and anything else I covered that I said I would link to down there. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I will catch you again next time.